Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. We heard the governor's state of the state about a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to talk about where Arizona is headed, not only budgetarily, the opioid crisis, funding for K-12 education with a guy who's right in the thick of it. Senate President Steve Yarbrough represents Chandler and a tiny little slice of Gilbert. You've been in there how many years now, all told?
This is my 16th and final year in the legislature.
This is it?
This is it.
Now, you were in the House, went to the Senate. A lot of people, as you know, play this shell game. They go from the House to the Senate. They get term limited. They jump back.
Exactly.
You're not doing that?
No, sir.
Why not?
Well, I figure 16 years is good enough. I figured out my way around the place, and I now should let somebody else do it.
For the people who don't like term limits, they would say you're exactly the guy who needs to be down there, who knows his way around.
Well,
that's the argument on that side.
Right, exactly. And that's a fair argument. I mean, the ultimate term limit is the next election. But I just feel like it's been long enough, and there are other capable people who will come along, and the job will get done.
After 10 years of being in the wilderness, talking about budgetarily in Arizona, it's been a tough road to hoe.
Yes.
Right? You finally are climbing out.
We are. We are starting to see revenues picking up nicely. Not as rapidly as we would actually prefer, but on a nice positive incline at this point.
And there will be a surplus in 17?
There will be a very modest surplus.
$5 million?
Yeah, something like that. But, you know, we spend anything we get.
We do?
Absolutely.
So do you take that surplus, that $5 million, and stick it in the rainy day fund, or what do you do?
I think it's so small that probably nobody's even going to worry about doing that.
Just carry forward.
Yeah, just carry it forward.
What is job one in Arizona?
Job one in Arizona is trying to maximize K-12 public education funding.
Total budget in Arizona now is what? How much, roughly?
$10.1 billion, the general fund.
And how much, I know it's half, a little more than half, $5 billion on K-12?
Roughly $5 billion goes to K-12.
Okay, so for people who say we don't spend enough on education, we're spending over half of the state budget on K-12.
Yes, we are, and we actually spend a bit more than most states as a percentage of the total general fund.
Then why isn't that enough?
Well, it's not enough because when you look at all the needs that are out there and you look at the things that you hopefully could accomplish if you spend more, that's the argument. And admittedly, what we spend from a gross perspective is frankly modest.
So the overall number. Do
Yes.
you believe that there is a correlation between money spent on education and education outcomes?
I believe there is a correlation to a point, but it is also true that just more money by itself doesn't necessarily accomplish the objective that you might have trying to improve student academic achievement.
To me, and there are reasons for it that we could get into, Utah, they don't spend a ton on education, but they get a very good outcome. Is this because of the family structure that's intact in Utah?
Yes.
Because of the high Mormon population?
Yeah, I think that's admittedly true. I think anyone would agree. Utah is a fairly unique circumstance, and so I think they generate a better outcome with fewer dollars than probably anywhere else in the country.
Who is analogous to us? I mean, we do have an immigrant population. When you start talking about test scores, this is going to be a drag on test scores. This is not a knock, it's just a fact. If you have kids in here who don't speak English as a first language, they're going to struggle.
Exactly, they are, and it costs more money to try to get them up to speed. And we have, in my view, a moral obligation to try to do all we can to give those kids the best opportunity we can going forward.
Does that mean public school is going to be for those kids and charters and private school is going to be for other kids?
No, I don't hold to that because charters have to admit everybody. And interestingly enough, a lot of the high-quality peer-reviewed academic literature demonstrates that private schools are actually more diverse than accompanying public schools are.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Tell me about your background. I know you were over at ASU in student affairs. You're a teacher.
Well, actually, I practiced law for all these years, but I've been much involved in the education exercise, primarily through my engagement with a 501c3 charitable organization implementing the scholarship tax credit law.
You know, Governor Symington ushered in just an explosion in charter schools in this state. On balance, do you believe that they have helped the overall education of kids in Arizona?
I would certainly say yes. I believe that they have. I think that some of the very best charter schools in the country are schools in Arizona, and they're doing a great job. Plus, they are also reaching out to a lot of at-risk kids. There are a lot of charters that serve the neediest of kids, and so consequently, yes, I would say that's the case.
Since it's a per-pupil funding formula in Arizona, in other words, fanny in the seat in the public school, money comes in. Do charters take away from public schools in a way that are harming public schools, do you believe?
Well, and of course, John, charters are public schools, but I know, but they're a different breed of public school indeed. No, I don't believe they do that at all. They get a few more dollars per student, but they do not access the local property tax at all. So on whole,
that's right,
they actually are not taking away from the district schools, in my opinion.
In your workday, how much of your time generally, just give me a percentage, is spent on the education issue?
More than half.
Reflects the state budget?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Okay. Let's talk about the opioid crisis. You guys made quick work of this. The governor talked about it early January, making it a priority. How much work is going on in the background before he does that speech, where you guys are starting to coalesce, make decisions on where you're going to go from here, that results in a very quick bill coming out, and he signed it on Friday?
Yes.
Or Thursday. Did he sign it Thursday?
He signed it Friday.
Okay.
Yes. So, well, a lot of work went on behind the scenes because he issued an executive order, and that sort of launched a lot of the preparation. And then he had a lot of his staff devoting a great deal of time working with our staff, the House staff, to really put this together. We were blessed in probably the most bipartisan effort I have ever seen in my 16 years at the legislature. That bill passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate. That's pretty much unheard of for a policy initiative of that magnitude.
That's incredible. Let's take a look at the governor's State of the State and see some of the things he talked about. And obviously opioids, which he talked about, and you've tackled that, and K through 12 education. Take a look.
80% of our new budget priorities, you'll see Friday, will be for public education.
Governor Doug Ducey promised more money for public K-12 education during his State of the State address. He didn't go into detail, but he did push back on the notion that education is bad in the state.
Some folks think the best argument for a greater investment in our public schools is to claim that our schools are failing. Well, they're wrong.
But Dawn Penich-Thacker with public school advocacy group Save Our Schools Arizona wasn't convinced what the governor said would be enough.
Well, it'll be satisfactory if he actually delivers on this, but let's remember when he says 80%, 80% is still zero if we're talking about the $4 billion we've lost since the recession.
And Senate Democrat Steve Farley, a candidate for governor, said that the governor has previously shown he's not doing enough for educators.
He doesn't seem serious about solving the problem, just like last year when he said he was going to give teachers a 0.4% raise. That's not enough to do anything. That's why 900 more have left this year.
Steve Yarbrough, the president of the Arizona Senate, is our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. So when you hear somebody say that, what's your response? That it's crumbs?
Well, that's really disappointing because it's clearly not crumbs. It's real money, real hard-earned taxpayers' money, and the taxpayers want us to spend it in that fashion, and we are absolutely doing our best. Now, if we had more money, would we spend more money? I suppose we would. But you can only spend what you have. We have to have a balanced budget. We are not Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you can't print your own money.
Exactly right.
Okay, so I'm forgetting the prop number. Is it 301?
301, yes.
Okay, that will, I'm sure the public will buy on to continuing this.
It's my expectation they will. However, I personally would like us to take a hard look at the pots where that money goes. This was 20 years ago.
Yeah, explain 301 for people who are just tuning in and may not know what 301 is.
301 is a 0.6 of a cent additional sales tax that everybody pays on every transaction. It generates $667 million a year that goes exclusively to education, but it's divided among like 10 different pots. And it's been 20 years, and I would suggest that we may want to at least take a look at those pots, see if we need to tweak them.
One of the questions is that not enough of the pots, one of the pots is for teacher pay. Doesn't go far enough.
Well, and that's a challenge because it goes to the classroom site fund, and still teacher pay is the prerogative of the local school board, not the legislature, and not even to a considerable degree the taxpayers. We fund the pot, but those school districts are the ones that actually make those decisions.
How much generally just goes to maintenance and operation, not teacher salaries?
Arizona, unfortunately, has a higher percentage of its revenue going for non-teacher salaries than most states.
Because we're high growth? We have to build schools?
We're high growth. We are in a desert. It's expensive. We have to run school buses for a long ways. There are a bunch of legitimate factors. I'm not saying it's wrong, although most of us really passionately would prefer more money in the teacher's pocketbook as opposed to going to other administrative costs.
I got a crazy idea. I'm just going to throw it out there. With all of this Uber, Lyft, all of this technology coming, could we get school buses out of the mix and privatize that? Has anybody talked about it?
I've not heard that ever suggested, John. Might be a great idea.
I'm looking at this.
Solve the problem.
Now,
for
I
us.
don't want to go off on light rail, but
yeah.
you know, you start talking about putting hard track that is not nimble to demographic shifts. You're spending tens and hundreds of millions on this, and you wonder if the technology, by the time they get this stuff done, you won't need it anymore.
Exactly right. I happen to have been one of those people back in the day who was skeptical about light rail and having it actually be what we wanted going forward. And I think your point's well taken. There are a lot of other ways to move the public that might be better than a very expensive light rail system.
Let's talk about this opioid situation as well. And again, you made moves on this. This is tape number 4. There have been some criticism of it. People are a little bit worried. It's going to limit the initial opioid prescription to 5 days. I made the point on the air, Mr. President, that I recently got a root canal, and I got 30, what are they? Not Percocets, it's stronger than that. It was like the real stuff.
Yeah, Oxycontin
I'm thinking,
or
man,
something.
yeah, do I need this? And I didn't.
Right. You probably didn't take but two or three of them and quit if
I
you
found
did that.
Advil to be better, actually.
Right.
Thank goodness.
Well, it was a balancing act, and I think we achieved a fairly good outcome in that regard, because we don't want people who have legitimate needs to find themselves unable to deal with their pain circumstances.
Right.
So we amended the bill significantly at the very end to try to create circumstances where those folks would be able to get that kind of treatment if they needed it.
You remember what happened with the Sudafed, the concern over pseudoephedrine making meth.
Exactly.
And then suddenly you've got a cold or you've got allergy and you can't get a Sudafed without running through hoops of fire.
Right.
You don't want that.
Exactly, we don't. And I think we found what hopefully will be a good medium to deal with that problem. 800
overdose deaths in Arizona since June.
It's incredible.
And a lot of these folks are not junkies. They're people who've had operations.
No, they're our neighbors. They are people who, it shocks us when we discover that they are addicted and they end up losing their lives because of an addiction. And the governor was really passionate about trying to make some progress in this arena.
What would you like to say as we go to break about what you guys crafted and what you said was an almost unprecedented consensus from Democrats, Republicans, and the governor to make this happen? What would you like them to know? What's the takeaway?
I'd like them to know that I think we've made real progress, and I would encourage the rest of America to take a hard look at what we did and see if it might work for them as well.
Okay, we're back on Newsmaker Sunday with Steve Yarbrough, Senate Majority Leader and now Senate President. You were Majority Leader for how many years?
2 years.
And then Senate
now
President?
In my second year as President.
How's it being President? You like it?
I do. I'm liking it even more this year than I liked it last year.
And why? Money? Budget?
Well, no, I think it's just being more comfortable with the task. I mean, it's a very demanding and vigorous job, and I retired from my day job very recently, and so now I have more time to devote to this task.
Okay, when we come back, should these guys get paid more? I think it's been, was it 1989, early 90s somewhere, where we had our last raise for state lawmakers. Are we not attracting the best and brightest because we don't pay enough for the job? We're going to talk to the Senate President, Steve Yarbrough, about that when we come back. Senator Steve Yarbrough, he is the state Senate president and has been for 2 years. He was the Senate Majority Leader before that. He's our guest this week on Newsmaker Sundays. We talk about where we are as a state right now. I raised a question before the break. State lawmakers now are making how much a year?
$24,000 plus we get mileage and a per diem when we are in session.
That's Senate and House, doesn't matter.
Yes, same salary.
Okay, that's got to be right around the poverty line.
Yeah, well, it probably is. The last pay increase was 1998.
Oh, 1998, okay.
Yeah, for the legislature, and any kind of inflation measure would say that it certainly ought to be more than that today.
Do you think you can attract the best and brightest with that salary?
You know, I'm going to say that I still do believe that, because the people that I serve with are amazingly gifted on both sides of the aisle.
Are they mostly retired?
A substantial number are retired. A fair number may have a spouse who has a significant job who makes it possible for them to serve in the legislature. And then there are others, a few, who actually are trying to live on that salary.
Why have we not seen you take a run at Congress?
Oh, I guess because I'm afraid I might prevail and then I'd have to serve.
Interesting. You don't want to go back to that cesspool? You don't want to drain the swamp?
I wouldn't mind draining the swamp, but I just don't want to be the guy with a hand pump.
Let me ask you about that. I think it's always interesting what happens state versus nationally. Are you pretty comfortable with what's happening with Donald Trump right now as a president?
Well, I'll say I am in love with a lot of his policies. He frequently just drives me crazy on a personal basis, but that's
style.
The harshness of it, that's not my style, and so naturally I would suggest that he ought to adopt my style.
Do you think because of Donald Trump we're in for a very interesting midterm coming up? And
well,
statewide elections?
Yeah, all midterms, of course, are always interesting. The party out of power relative to the presidency usually loses a lot of seats, and that'll be a challenge this time as well.
Do you think that the Republicans could lose their majorities in either the House or Senate here in Arizona?
Well, I think that the Senate is always very much in play. I mean, it's a 17-13.
Why is that?
Well, it's just the nature of the fact that there are two House members and they serve identical districts. And in Arizona, the Republicans have held the House every year since one man, one vote was adopted by the Supreme Court. So I don't think the House is at risk. The Senate's always in play.
Okay, let's talk about one of the issues that's hanging out there right now. You're going to love this. This is tape number 7. Photo radar enforcement, okay? Red light cameras. There's another move again.
Yes.
And I'm trying to remember his name because he texts me all the time.
Representative Grantham has the bill in the House.
Yeah, and there's another guy who always sends me stuff.
Probably, well, I don't know who.
Why are we so, why have we seen such a proliferation of this? Is it a revenue deal?
Well,
beyond public safety?
Yeah. Well, I think it is a revenue deal. I mean, I recall Star Valley was practically funding the entire municipality with revenue from their photo radar, and of course we took it off of state highways, and that took care of that. Now I think it's much less so, although there are still some communities that probably are getting a significant amount of their revenue from photo radar. Perhaps Paradise Valley might be one of them.
This argument that it frees up officers to do more important work.
Well, as the father of 2 career police officers, I would say there's probably some truth to that.
I did not know that.
Well, yes, that's true. And so I think there's certainly truth to that. But there are all sorts of other constitutional questions and questions about safety. Are you making it more or less safe? Those are all legitimate questions.
Your kids who are cops,
Yes.
and I use that, that's an affectionate term.
Yes.
It's not a knock.
No.
What do they think about photo enforcement? Have you ever talked to them about it?
Actually, well, I don't know if I should identify him. One of my sons does not like it at all. The other one probably is a little more tolerant of it.
Okay. You did not like it on state freeways. You felt there was a gotcha component to it, that you're haranguing good, hard-working, tax-paying people.
Well, plus there's no confrontation. I mean, there's some real, you don't get
Face to face.
Yeah, who's the witness in this case? So
okay.
I have those reservations.
Red light cameras, a little.
Yeah, I'm a little more ambivalent about red light
I'm
cameras.
with you on that.
Because
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, because there's some evidence that suggests that it really is a positive safety factor with red light cameras.
And people blowing through intersections really do kill people.
Exactly.
Getting
and that's
somebody
where most
going
of them-
5 miles over the speed limit, they're not necessarily a menace out on the road.
Exactly right.
Okay. What do you want to talk about in the last part of the program?
Oh my! I don't know. We have gone rapid fire.
We'll figure that out in the break.
All
How
right,
about
fair
that?
enough.
Steve Yarbrough, Senate President. We're back on Newsmaker Sunday in a minute. Back on Newsmaker Sunday, Steve Yarbrough is the state Senate president. We're having a great conversation. Let's show tape number 6. This is video of the border. Are we beyond in the Arizona legislature trying to deal with enforcing illegal immigration and this kind of stuff that Pierce and these guys were involved in?
Yeah.
Are we beyond this now, or is it still an issue?
Well, it's probably still an issue in the minds of folks, but I think we're probably beyond it. I think people pretty well concede at this point that that's a federal issue and it's going to have to be dealt with from that angle.
All right, let's talk about, you've had some issues, sexual harassment training down there.
Yep.
Is this time well spent?
Well, I think it is, and we've had a policy in the Senate for many years. It's worked well. We've had no complaints in this time period. And so I think, we're dealing with it appropriately.
It's like any other workplace probably in the country.
Exactly
You're
right.
going to have a couple of people who are on the fringe or over it.
Exactly right.
What is issue 1? You said education. Is that issue 1 going forward this year?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I think we're going to do some good things funding-wise there. And just as a scoop, I'm going to be proposing a major reform to the Independent Redistricting Commission.
For what reason?
Because I think that historically we've been through 2 rounds of it. The Republicans hijacked it once, then the Democrats hijacked it. I'd like to devise a system that is going to be actually bipartisan and fair and not subject to being hijacked.
Okay, so what would that give us in the back end?
What it would give us is a redistricting process where the districts are truly fair and that they are not overloaded in one fashion or another.
Not gerrymandered.
Exactly.
Okay, final question. On this teacher deal, on education funding, since we don't have the money, at least you guys don't think we do, to just dump the whole budgetary pot, $10 billion, into education, are we on a path right now where what you guys are trying to do is to say 10 years from now we're going to look back and go, okay, we finally got there. We had to do it incrementally. But 10 years from now, we'll look back and we'll be at a much different place. Is that the strategy?
I think that's the strategy, and I hope it's even sooner than 10 years. I think we will see if the economy continues to grow, as it is doing at the present time, I think we will see that become much better and in less than 10.
Final thing, we got 30 seconds. Would it be better that you guys meet every 2 years instead of every year? 2 years, a session every 2 years.
Yeah, that's a Texas and some other states model. No, I don't think so. I think that the course of human events moves sufficiently rapidly that I think it makes sense to do it every
10
year.
seconds. Budget is good. Will it be even better in 2018?
I'm hoping.
We're on a good swing.
I believe so.
Okay. President, Mr.
Thank you.
President.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure you enjoy that, Mr. President. It
I
has
do.
a
It's pretty
nice
cool.
ring to it. Steve Yarbrough, our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Thank you for coming down. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. And we'll see you next week on Newsmaker Sunday.